Hello and welcome to Newsweek South Asia, your one-stop destination for in-depth analysis of security challenges, regional conflicts and the evolving threat of terrorism. Let's take a look at the headlines first. Border tensions boil as Taliban strikes back at Pakistan. India unmasks Pakistan's terror lies and human rights hypocrisy at UNGA. And calls grow at UN to hold Pakistan accountable for enforced disappearances. Tensions along the 2,600-kilometer Durand Line have exploded into one of the fiercest Pakistan-Afghanistan confrontations in years. What began as strikes and explosions in Kabul has spilled over into deadly exchanges across multiple frontier posts, reopening old wounds between two neighbors, long tied by history, insurgency and mutual suspicion. Tonight we unpack what happened, why it matters for regional security, and who stands to gain or lose.
The violence erupted late on October 11, when Taliban forces in Afghanistan launched coordinated attacks on Pakistani military posts along the Durand Line in what the Taliban described as retaliation for airstrikes in Kabul earlier that week. Exchanges of heavy fire were reported at multiple points in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Angur Adda, Bajor, Kurram, Dir and Chitral, and in Balochistan's Bahram Cha. The immediate trigger was a series of explosions in Kabul and in Paktika province earlier in the week. Afghan officials said the blasts, which rocked the capital and a civilian market, followed Pakistani strikes aimed at Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan operatives believed to be travelling in the city. Islamabad has not publicly taken formal credit for the Kabul strikes but has repeatedly insisted it will act against militants it blames for deadly operations inside Pakistan if those militants operate from Afghan soil. Each side paints the other as the aggressor, and independent verification of many strike and casualty claims remains limited.
सरहदी इलाकों में जो हमारे दूर दराज इलाके हैं वहाँ पे कुछ अटैक हुआ है, हम उसकी मज़म्मत करता है और हम पाकिस्तान हुकूमत का ये काम एक बड़ा गलती समझता है.
Afghanistan's Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi, who was on an official visit to India this week, told that the situation had been brought under control. He said Afghanistan's partners including Qatar and Saudi Arabia urged restraint and that the Taliban government had halted further hostilities.
हमारे दोस्त ममालिक जैसा कतर और सऊदी अरबिस्तान उन्होंने ख्वास्ता उन्होंने तलब किया कि अभी जंग रुकना चाहिए, तो हमारे तरफ से जंग रुका हुआ और अभी हालात कंट्रोल में हैं, तो हम अच्छा ताल्लुकात चाहते हैं.
Once a close patron of the Taliban, Pakistan now finds itself on the receiving end of its former proxy's firepower. Islamabad had expected the Taliban to reign in the TTP after 2021, but instead terrorists have grown stronger. A United Nations report confirmed that Taliban fighters have supplied weapons and logistical aid to the TTP, a group ideologically aligned with them and responsible for major terror attacks in Pakistan, including the 2014 Peshawar Sool massacre. That history of patronage has now frayed into outright confrontation, a dangerous shift for a region that still bears the scars of decades of insurgency.
I think Afghanistan need stabilization, need tranquility, need peace. Afghanistan have suffered enough over the last 5 decades, ever since the invasion of Afghanistan by the Soviet Union and the interfighting among different factions in Afghanistan. So again, to flare up a tension between Pakistan and Afghanistan is not in the favor of any part of any countries, the stakeholder in the region, including India, South Asian region. So it's not a time for a war. And that was the Prime Minister of India have said it. It's not an era of wars. And I think Pakistan has to understand that solving a problem with Afghanistan, it's of their own interest first.
Analysts say Pakistan's airstrikes and years of interference in Afghanistan's internal politics have now backfired. The Taliban views Pakistan's cross-border operations as direct aggression, while Islamabad accuses Kabul of sheltering terrorists. This cycle of blame and retaliation threatens to push both nations towards an uncontrolled conflict, endangering an already fragile region.
This development has taken place, and obviously the responsibilities for this kind of retaliation which Afghan government has done against Pakistan is of Pakistani creation. And Pakistan had carried out strikes inside Afghanistan, killing several innocent people, and Foreign Minister of Afghanistan, who is currently on a week-long visit to India, Mr. Muttaqi, he has condemned this attack of Pakistan on Afghanistan, and obviously he had promised for this kind of retaliation, which the Afghanistan has done it. And in this retaliation, 12 Pakistani soldiers have died, and obviously Pakistan has got the strong response from Afghanistan. And it is quite clear that the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan at this point of time is very low, and it is worsening rather.
For now, the border remains tense but calm, with crossings like Torkham closed and troops redeployed. Once hailed as brothers in arms, Pakistan and the Taliban are now adversaries on the frontier that has never been fully recognized by Kabul. The episode exposes a harsh truth. Pakistan's decades-old strategy of nurturing militant proxies has come full circle, leaving its western border in flames and its regional credibility in ruins.
On the sidelines of the 60th UN Human Rights Council session in Geneva, political activists and human rights defenders laid bare Pakistan's dark and deepening record of enforced disappearances across Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The side event titled Enforced Disappearances in Pakistan, Amplifying Voices Demanding Justice, Calling for Global Action, organized by the Center for Human Rights and Peace Advocacy, called for urgent international intervention and accountability from Islamabad for decades of abductions, killings and torture committed under the guise of national security.
For years, Pakistan's powerful military and intelligence establishment has been accused of systematically silencing dissent through abductions, extrajudicial killings and mass detentions. From the rugged hills of Balochistan to the tribal belts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the streets of Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, thousands remain missing, their families left in agony and fear. At a UNHRC side event organized by the Center for Human Rights and Peace Advocacy, speakers from Pakistan and POJK raised alarm over rising human rights violations, calling Pakistan one of the worst offenders in South Asia for enforced disappearances and extrajudicial abuses. Human rights organizations estimate that over 8,000 people have disappeared in Pakistan since the early 2000s, while unofficial figures suggest the number could be far higher. Victims include students, journalists, political activists, and human rights defenders who dare to question the state's policies. Pashtun political activist Fazlur Rahman Afridi, representing the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, revealed that thousands of Pashtuns continue to remain unaccounted for.
We submitted, recently 6,500 confirmed cases of, enforced disappearances of just Pashtun people. Besides Pashtun, there are Baloch people and Sindhis also. The number is astronomical. So we informed the United Nations Human Rights Council about these enforced disappearances, especially those internment centers. 44 known and several unknown internment centers where these, missing persons are, treated really badly. They are tortured, and most of them are killed. And then these people are dumped into mass graves, by the Pakistani army.
Afridi added that despite repeated communications from the UN Working Group on Enforced Disappearances, Pakistan has failed to provide satisfactory answers reflecting a deliberate attempt to conceal state-sponsored crimes. The conference also highlighted the deteriorating human rights situation in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where the state's brutal response to peaceful protests has triggered international alarm. Pakistan's so-called Azad region has become a prison for dissenting voices, as activists and journalists face arrest, torture, and forced disappearances for merely demanding their rights. Political activist Nasir Aziz Khan, spokesperson of the United Kashmir People's National Party, condemned the continuing repression and killings in POJK, particularly after the recent demonstrations against Pakistan's exploitative control over the region's resources.
There are many people, they are disappeared. But recently what is happening in so-called Azad Kashmir, people are concerned about their life. Because more than 12 people, they lost life since 29th September. Till now, we got reports from there, from media and social media. And Pakistan is using brutal force against civilians, peaceful protesters. And they are firing indiscriminately on the protesters. And they killed people, they injured people. There are hundreds of people in the jail, and they torture people. And through this international community gathering in United Nations, we urge that UN should intervene to protect the life of the Kashmiris who are living under Pakistani occupation.
Khan accused Islamabad of having no legal or moral right to occupy the territory, exploit its natural wealth, and suppress its people through force and intimidation. The situation in Balochistan remains equally grim. Decades of military operations, arbitrary detentions, and abductions have created an environment of fear and lawlessness. Baloch activists allege that Pakistan's security forces operate secret internment centers where detainees are held without charge, tortured, and often executed extrajudicially. Despite the repeated calls from international watchdogs, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, Islamabad continues to deny the existence of enforced disappearances, branding the victims as terrorists to justify its repression. As Pakistan continues to portray itself as a democracy, the reality within its border tells a far darker story, one of silenced voices, unmarked graves, and shattered families. The call from Geneva was clear. It is time for the international community to demand justice for the disappeared and to hold Pakistan accountable for its systematic campaign of terror against its own people.
At the United Nations General Assembly, India has once again exposed Pakistan's duplicity on terrorism and human rights. Speaking at the 80th UNGA session, Indian lawmaker Nishikant Dubey slammed Islamabad for its grave violations of child rights and cross-border terrorism, while defending India's counter-terror Operation Sindoor as a balanced and legitimate response to Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. His remarks followed India's earlier statement last week, delivered by parliamentarian P.P. Chaudhary, which also dismantled Pakistan's falsehoods on Jammu and Kashmir and highlighted its domestic repression and global isolation. India's strong diplomatic statements at the UNGA comes on the heels of Operation Sindoor, a targeted counter-terror operation launched in May 2025 after the Pahalgam terror attack, in which 26 civilians were brutally killed in Jammu and Kashmir by Pakistan-backed terrorists. The operation involved surgical strikes on 9 major terror hideouts inside Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. New Delhi described it as a measured and non-escalatory response designed to protect Indian civilians while dismantling terrorist infrastructure. At the UN debate on children and armed conflict, Indian lawmaker Nishikant Dubey drew the world's attention to Pakistan's appalling record on child rights. Citing the UN Secretary General's 2025 report, he said, Pakistan continues to be one of the most serious violators of the CAAC agenda, responsible for cross-border shelling, airstrikes, and attacks on schools and health workers, particularly along the Afghan border. He said Pakistan's military actions have led to the killing and maiming of Afghan children, while its state machinery simultaneously shelters and trains terrorist groups that target civilians in India.
यह एक ऐसा देश है जो CAAC एजेंडे का सबसे गंभीर उल्लंघन करने वालों में से एक है। हम उनकी सीमाओं के भीतर बच्चों के साथ हो रहे गंभीर दुर्व्यवहारों से दुनिया का ध्यान हटाने के लिए उनके प्रयासों की कड़ी निंदा करते हैं। जैसा कि CAAC पर महासचिव द्वारा 2025 में जारी रिपोर्ट और साथ साथ चल रहे सीमा पार आतंकवाद से भी स्पष्ट होता है कि अपनी सीमाओं से परे इस रिपोर्ट में पाकिस्तान द्वारा स्कूलों, विशेषकर बालिका विद्यालयों में स्वास्थ्य कर्मियों पर किए हमलों का विस्तृत ब्यौरा प्रस्तुत किया गया है और अफगानिस्तान सीमा की उन घटनाओं के बारे में बताया गया है जहां पाकिस्तान द्वारा सीमा पार से की गई गोलीबारी और हवाई हमले सीधे तौर पर अफगान बच्चों की हत्या और अपहंगता के लिए जिम्मेदार हैं। यदि ऑपरेशन सिंदूर का उल्लेख किया जाए सभापति महोदय, तो अंतर्राष्ट्रीय समुदाय पाकिस्तान द्वारा प्रतिष्ठित आतंकवादियों द्वारा किए गए क्रूर लक्षित हमलों को भूला नहीं है, जिसमें 22 अप्रैल 2025 को जम्मू और कश्मीर के पहलगांव में 26 निर्दोष नागरिकों की जान चली गई। एक सुविचारित और संतुलित प्रतिक्रिया में भारत ने आतंकवाद के खिलाफ अपनी रक्षा के लिए इसके अपराधियों को न्याय के कटघरे में लाने के लिए अपने वैध अधिकारों का प्रयोग किया और मई 2025 में ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के तहत 9 आतंकवादी ठिकानों पर लक्षित हमले किए।
Dubey also highlighted India's contrasting approach, one grounded in child welfare and human development. He pointed to initiatives such as Child Helpline 1098 and programs for the holistic development of children, underlining India's commitment to human rights and social progress. Analysts say his statement was not just about moral contrast, but part of India's long-term diplomatic strategy to expose Pakistan's duplicity by tying terrorism and human rights violations together before global institutions. Earlier last week, at the UNGA's third committee, senior lawmaker PP Chaudhry led India's first parliamentary delegation to the session, a rare move that signaled how seriously New Delhi now treats global narrative building. In his intervention, Chaudhry dismantled Pakistan's propaganda on Jammu and Kashmir and exposed its record of political repression, media censorship, and state-sponsored violence against its own citizens. He pointed out that Pakistan continues to misuse UN forums to project itself as a victim, even as its own military regime jails opposition leaders, suppresses protests, and bombs restive regions like Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
Pakistan continued to display its utter lack of respect for this august forum by misusing the principle of self-determination to further its narrow political ends. I would like to emphasize that it is habitual for Pakistan to respect falsehood equivalences, which are symbolic of Pakistan's nefarious designs and sinister intent. The rapid strides made by the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir in multiple spheres attest to focused attention paid by India to improve the daily lives of citizens. Democratic tradition and values are alien to Pakistan, and it is not a surprise that they have chosen to not account for the will of the people by them. As recently as October 2024, a country that regularly rigs its election, jailed its popular leaders, bombed its population, and is presently brutally suppressing popular protests should be ashamed to point fingers at others. The truth is, Pakistan is diverting focus from the failed state it is. Nothing short can be expected.
Chaudhry's remarks also underscored India's developmental achievements, from lifting 250 million people out of poverty to expanding social security coverage to 64% of the population. He noted that women's participation in higher education and the workforce has reached record levels, and technology-led governance reforms like UPI and direct benefit transfer have revolutionized financial inclusion. These statements together painted a sharp contrast: India as a nation of progress and accountability, and Pakistan as a state trapped in extremism and regression. Experts believe India's dual interventions, Chaudhry's earlier address and Dubey's recent remarks mark a turning point in India's global narrative against Pakistan. On the sidelines of the 60th Human Rights Council session, political activist Shehbaz Khan from Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan exposed Islamabad's systematic exploitation of the region. The region remains under Pakistan's tight control, where taxation, land leasing and resource exploitation occur without local consent. Decades of political exclusion and governance failures have left its people marginalized, demanding urgent international scrutiny and accountability. We have a report.
In a territory where governance fails to reflect local voices, residents face economic and social challenges. The absence of political representation leaves communities vulnerable, while illegal taxation adds to their burden. On the sidelines of the 60th UN Human Rights Council session in Geneva, political activist Shehbaz Khan from Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan highlighted Pakistan's systematic operation of Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan was exposed, highlighting financial exploitation and unaccountable governance that continues to undermine public welfare across the region.
Gilgit-Baltistan is a disputed area in terms of United Nations, and there is a lot of interruptions from Islamabad, because when you are not in a constitutional position, you are a disputed area, so you must be treated as a disputed area. And the resolution of UNO, we are disputed area. So then why you are nowadays, you ask me about now what are the situation about taxation. They impose, first of all, the now people demanding, when you are for poor provinces of Pakistan, and then you are like a deny, you are outside of, and you are a disputed area. So why you are impose taxes on the people of Gilgit-Baltistan?
Resource-rich POGB faces decisions on land and development imposed without local consultation, fueling resentment and uncertainty. Recent floods have devastated communities, yet the government has provided minimal support, leaving residents to rebuild roads, water systems and homes themselves. Strategic projects, including cross-border economic corridors, further sideline local voices, highlighting how systemic neglect continues to threaten livelihoods and erode trust in institutions.
अभी जो है मोस्ट इम्पोर्टेंट जो है इस वक्त जो है सैलाब का जो है एवरीवेयर, ये जो सैलाबी जो है बारिश हुई, ये जो क्या कहते हैं इसको जो है आउटब्रस्ट जो, तो वो एवरीवेयर जो है सारा जो है गांव के गांव तबाह हो गए। जब वो ये चीज़ें जो है आप वो पाकिस्तान में एक डिपार्टमेंट है जो नेशनल डिज़ास्टर का जो डिपार्टमेंट है, वो जो है इनएफिशिएंट, सिर्फ जो है वो सिर्फ मैसेजेस वो करने के लिए है, बकाया जो है कोई उसका जो है ऑन ग्राउंड जो है कुछ भी नहीं है। तो लोग कहते हैं जब वो करते हैं तो सेल्फ जो है सेल्फ हेल्प कम्युनिटीज़ जो है खुद जो है उन्होंने रोड वो किए, खुद जो है वो पानी के नाले जो गांव-गांव जो है पानी नहीं था, सारा जो है सेल्फ, गवर्नमेंट ने कुछ भी नहीं किया। सिर्फ जो है वो बैठ के जो है वो डिक्टेशन देना और जो है वो खाओ पियो इस तरह की जो चीज़ें हैं.
The landscape of Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan, rich in natural resources yet politically marginalized, underscores the urgent need for international attention. Without meaningful reforms, unaccountable governance will continue to dominate. Recognition of local rights, adherence to human rights norms, and empowerment of communities are essential to ensure that residents can exercise their agency and safeguard their heritage and resources.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra signing off on behalf of the entire team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.